Hello fellow cinephiles, Film Guru here. Today I'm continuing on my director retrospective focusing on Lars von Trier. And today I'm looking at Antichrist. This came out in 2009 and stars Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg. The film really focuses on a married couple, played by Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg, who are only known as he and she in the film. It looks at the tragic loss of their son in a freak accident where he fell out of a window, why they were involved in the ecstasy of sex. And it's really about the struggle that they feel, the grieving process that they go through, and how Charlotte Gainsbourg's character is really affected by what's happened, really blames herself. And it's really about her trying to navigate through grief and the process that it takes, and she has to go through. She ends up in hospital for a period of time, and then her husband, he, played by Willem Dafoe, who's a psychiatrist, ultimately takes her out of the hospital and divulges a way of trying to help her deal with her grief, and becomes sort of the rock in the film. We don't really see him change too much. We see him sad at the beginning of the film, obviously for the death of their son during the funeral, but ultimately he shifts into something that's more removed from the whole experience. And he does that in order to help his wife. He's not handling things very well at all, and breaks down crying, tries to hurt herself, is filled with rage and sadness and anger. And she's really struggling to find a way through it. And he ultimately helps her along the way. He comes up with a plan to ultimately take her out of the house they live in and take his wife to a cabin that they own in the woods in the middle of nowhere, and helps her remove herself from the situation, and things a reminder of her of what happened, and obviously her son Nick. And this is where the film starts to take a strange turn. When we get to the cabin, strange things start to happen. She goes up and down this scale of ups and downs, where she's really traumatized and affected. Then next minute she's happy and she's sort of acting like a child, dancing through the forest. But there's a fear that she has of the forest and what's transpired there that we learn throughout the film. And then the film quickly escalates to quite a graphic and violent ending that you don't quite see coming, and when it comes it's quite of a shock, and it's very graphic with its depiction of violence. I'm not the hugest fan of Lars von Trier. I'm trying to be. I'm looking at all of his films and trying to find something that I enjoy. This is one of his films that I heard quite a lot about, that was quite graphic and violent and disturbing, and a friend of mine really likes it. So I went in not quite knowing what I'm going to expect, but ultimately, after seeing his other films, I sort of wanted to see what this film was all about and all the craze about. And look, I didn't love this film. I'll start with the positives, which is probably the best way to begin with this review. I really love the way it's shot. I'm pretty sure it's shot on film, and if it's digital, it's extraordinary. It just looks gorgeous. Every scene looks fantastic. The color's fantastic. The choices made with the camera work are brilliant. I think it's visually striking. That's the main thing I got from this. Just his ability to craft such striking imagery is just a mark of a true artist, I think, in many ways. There's particular sequences in this where he uses really slow motion, ultra slow, and it gives this feeling of a dream-like quality, but it also makes it look like it's a moving piece of art. To slow it down so much, the things don't move as quickly through the frame, and it looks like a picture. It looks like something from a video clip, and that's what I really feel with him as a director. He could really become a great video clip director and do, clips for bands like Tool or Manson or anything that's sort of a bit different, because his visual sense is quite extraordinary. In many ways, I feel like he's an artist trapped in a filmmaker's body, and this is how he expresses his art, and I really like that. I think the performances are solid here. I think Willem Dafoe is really good and does a solid job, but I think Charlotte Gainsbourg's absolutely phenomenal in this, and I think she's the best part about it. Just her descent through the variety of emotions that she goes through. The scale she goes up and down, where she's happy and sad and distraught and angry and violent and disturbed, and all of these emotions that she goes through, and she's quite extraordinary to watch. She's an actress I really enjoyed for a number of years. And what I really like about her is she doesn't do stuff in the scene that she doesn't feel. So if it calls for her to cry and she can't, well, she doesn't cry. And I kind of like that. She's sort of instinctual in the way she goes about acting, and I think she works really well with Lars von Trier. And she's probably the best part of this film in many ways. I really liked a lot of elements at the cabin, and I felt that the whole film could have really taken place at this cabin, and we saw things through flashbacks. And we could have been introduced a little more to the supernatural element that this film takes, because I thought that was the most interesting part. And just the things that the characters come up against and see and experience are just extraordinary to watch. And it is a very unsettling film, but it's also kind of interesting as well. There's a draw there, but not as much draw as I expected. And the music choices, not in the prologue or epilogue music, I don't particularly care for that. It's very operatic, and I don't think it works really well for what they're trying to say or go for. But other music throughout the film sort of works really well. That's all I really liked about it. It was a film I struggled with. I didn't really connect to the story. I didn't really care too much about the story at all. For me, when I'm watching a film, it's the first 30 minutes that I gauge the film on whether I'm going to enjoy it or not. First 30 minutes of this film, I just didn't connect to. I didn't really care much for. It wasn't until I got the cabin that it became really interesting. And that's why I think it should have been all focused at the cabin. But in saying that, there are things that happen in the cabin I didn't quite enjoy either. It's ultra violent, and I feel the violence doesn't really serve a purpose but to be violent. He's being violent for violence sake. I don't think it really adds to the story at all. And not only is it violent, it's very graphic. You see too much that you don't really need to see. And it felt like he was going more for shock and awe than he was trying to tell an ultimate story. I just didn't connect with either of the characters that well, even though Charlotte Gainsbourg is really fantastic in this film. Just the choices that the character make, I don't know if I really agreed with. They look at sexuality in it and how sex can be quite aggressive and animalistic, and I can kind of see what they were going with, but it didn't quite work for me either. It's not a film really for me. I could see what he was going for and the metaphors he was using. I liked the ultimate, how he had the three animals that represented the process that the character was going through: grief, despair, fear. And they were the three beggars. I kind of liked that. I liked that the film was split up into 4 categories or elements. You had the prologue to show you what happened and why, how the son died and the effect that had. And the epilogue at the end, which sort of comes all together. They're both shot in black and white. They have this huge operatic music that doesn't quite work for me, that I don't really like at all. And it's the start's kind of comical. I don't think that's really what he was going for. For the different emotions that the character goes through and the 3 beggars that the film sort of looks at. The first is the deer, which is grief and the loss of a child. It's very graphic with what that's exposing to the audience as well. You've got the fox, which represents despair, and then you've got the crow, which is sort of fear. And I thought this element was interesting. I didn't think they did enough with this. The ultimate thing with this film is they didn't set up the supernatural part. It felt like 2 separate films. The first half of the film felt like this drama of this couple going through grief and the loss of a child. And then when they got to the cabin, it just turned into this supernatural film that didn't quite mesh together in a way I liked. I think he used this much better in The House That Jack Built, his most recent film. I think this is sort of the prototype experimenting with that. It worked much better in The House That Jack Built because it was sort of leading to that, where this just felt left of center. It sort of came out of nowhere, and then I felt really disconnected from it because it wasn't really what they set up the story to be to begin with. And I just felt he could have had this scene with her at the beginning. Like there's scenes throughout the film where she's working on, she's cutting out imageries of women burning and women through history and that, like she's doing a thesis on it. And she has this scrapbook of different pictures cut out and articles and stuff. And it has the word genocide on top. I thought this element was interesting. When her husband finds this book, and then we start to learn about her thought patterns and what she really thinks of women. I really liked that. But I felt that they could have introduced that much earlier in the piece. I think in many ways there's this fear for she that everyone leaves her. She doesn't want them to leave. And the way she goes about that's quite extreme. And that's where the graphic violence in this film comes in that I just didn't like. It was just too full on, too dark, and I don't know if it really contributed to the story at all. I think he's an interesting director. And he has some interesting ideas, and he does not make films like everybody else. His films are unique and interesting. Sometimes you get lost in the pretentiousness of what he's trying to say. Look at what I can do. Look what I can do with slow motion and music. And that's what the start of this film felt like. And it was very graphic sexually too in this particular element at the start. And I just felt he got a bit pretentious, a bit carried away with what he was trying to say. And it wasn't clear the story he was trying to tell or what he was trying to talk about, that he would become much clearer in these later films. So this was kind of an experiment, I think, in a lot of ways. It sort of differed from his earlier films, and it sort of cemented the style that he made these films in. The camera work, the cuts, the really slow motion, the dark and twisted storyline. This is sort of what he started to do. And I realise a lot of his films are like that. They start off one way and then they turn into something else about halfway through, especially these horror thriller films that he makes. But overall, I just didn't care for this film. I wanted to like it, but it was just too much for me. That just didn't connect to anything and the story was lacking over the visuals. But he's still a very interesting filmmaker, and I like what he's trying to say in the films he's trying to make. And once again, he's like Rob Zombie. Zombie has so many really great ideas in his films, and he has really striking visuals in his film that feel like short films or video clips from when he's in his band. Lars von Trier is very like that, where he's hit and miss for me. This stuff I like, this stuff I don't, and overall I just didn't like this film as much as I wanted to. But if you're a fan of Lars von Trier and want to watch something really dark and different, this is definitely a film for you. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and hope you're enjoying the Director Retrospective series. I'm enjoying doing them, and I'm going to ultimately watch more of Lars von Trier films to do more reviews. Anyway, until next time, enjoy the movies.